Hello from Japan and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera, where today we're going to be looking at one of the more interesting Japanese rangefinder cameras from the 1950s, the Minolta V2. So if you're interested in this camera or other vintage Japanese cameras, I sell these in my eBay and Etsy stores. I'll provide links to my stores in the description below. So let's go ahead and take a look at this interesting camera. So, in the 1950s, just like today, there was a lot of competition for consumers in the photography market, and different manufacturers were coming up with different ideas to attract market share. And Minolta thought it would be an interesting idea to introduce a leaf shutter rangefinder camera with a maximum speed of 1/2000th of a second. At the time, the maximum shutter speeds for most cameras were 1/400th or 1/500th of a second. And this was marketed as a good camera for stopping action, for example, playing children or pets or animals or things like that. A good camera which would stop the action. It really wasn't so useful in the 1950s because there wasn't a lot of variety in the kinds of film available. And in those days, 100 speed film was considered fast. And so this wasn't a particularly useful feature at the time, but nowadays, when we do have faster films available, it's actually quite a good feature. You can actually take advantage of it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the controls and functions of the camera. We'll take a look at the top first, and here we have a single stroke winding lever. Minolta made a similar camera to the V2 called the V3, which had a 1/3000th top shutter speed. So as if 2000th wasn't fast enough for 100 speed film, they came out with 3000ths. The V3 looks similar to the V2. It is similar in most ways, except that it adds a light meter and the 1/3000th shutter speed, and it has a double stroke winding lever for the extra tension required to wind up the heavier spring in the shutter on that camera. On the other side, we have the film rewind lever, which folds in to avoid catching on things. And here we have the hot shoe, or not hot shoe, flash shoe. These didn't have a hot shoe, but by removing the screw and sliding back the flash shoe cover, you access the adjustment screws for the vertical and horizontal adjustment of the rangefinder. It's quite easy to adjust this particular camera. Moving to the front, we have a focusing tab on the bottom of the lens, which allows you to easily focus the camera with just one finger instead of using your hand like you would on other cameras. The shutter speed and apertures are adjusted with these two rings on the front. And like other 50s rangefinder cameras, this Minolta includes an EV scale, which allows you to know which EV number you're using. This can be a little bit easier if you're using a handheld light meter or a light meter app in your phone, just to look at the EV numbers and just dial your shutter speed and aperture until you get the number which matches your light meter or your smartphone app. The Minolta V2 came with a rather fast for the time 45mm f2 lens. And you could shoot at wider apertures at the higher speeds, but the maximum speed here, you can't actually shoot it at f2 at the maximum shutter speed. The shutter doesn't open quite all the way. It's not physically possible. The same is true of the V3. You get like the maximum aperture you can get, I believe, is like f5.6. So you can't actually use the widest aperture setting with the fastest shutter speed. But still, you can use the 1/1000th, and that's quite good for these cameras. And the lens is actually a very good quality lens and produces wonderful images. These cameras are a little bit on the expensive side because of the 1/2000th shutter speed, and also because they had a greatly improved viewfinder rangefinder system in these cameras over the earlier Minoltas. The windows are much bigger, allowing a more view of the subject, and we have a larger viewfinder window on the back, which makes it a little bit easier to use this if you're wearing glasses. If you do wear glasses, beware of the metal trim ring around here because it can scratch them. The V2 also features parallax correction, so you have more accurate composition and focusing with these. And the viewfinder and rangefinder are quite bright compared to other cameras. This system was carried on into the later Minolta cameras, like the Himatic series, the Himatic 7, 7S, and 11 shared the same improved viewfinder rangefinder system that the V2 introduced. To open the film door, you depress the lever here and it pops open. A good thing about the V2, an interesting feature, is that the channels on the film door and the channels on the back of the camera don't require light seals. So the light seals are prone to rotting and crumbling over time, and you end up getting dust from the light seals inside the mechanism of the camera. That's not an issue with these cameras. Cameras like this or the Canon P or whatever, which don't use any light seals. A thing to be aware of on these Minolta V2 cameras and some of the other Minoltas is the combination of metals used inside have a little bit of like a galvanic reaction when you keep them in a humid place, which can cause corrosion to the finish. So of course I recommend storing these in a dry place and don't keep them in the case when they're not being shot, if the camera includes the case. Always keep it in a nice cool dry place and not in the dark. That keeps the corrosion and fungus and other gremlins out of the cameras. Anyway, that's it for my review of the V2 camera. I hope you enjoyed it, and once again, if you're interested in this or other vintage Japanese cameras, please take a look at the links below to visit my stores. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, or any comments, please post them underneath. Thank you very much, and stay tuned for my next video.